When my father died, the words I never said to him weighed heavier than everything I had lived through. I spent 38 years building what I thought was success. Corner office on the 42nd floor, six-figure salary that doubled every few years, company car that cost more than most people's houses, respect from colleagues who looked at me like I had all the answers. I was climbing that ladder so fast, I forgot to look down and see who I was stepping on to get there. Most importantly, I forgot to look down and see the man who built the foundation I was standing on. My father called me every Sunday, every single Sunday for years. Same time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right after he finished watching his football game. And you know what I did? I'd see his name lighting up my phone screen and think, not now, I'm busy. I had presentations to prepare, deals to close, meetings that couldn't wait, emails that seemed urgent, problems that felt like the end of the world if I didn't solve them immediately. I'll call him back later, I'd tell myself, when I have time to really talk. Later never came. See, my dad was old school, born in 1943, grew up when men didn't talk about their feelings, when providing for your family meant working until your body gave out, when love was shown through actions, not words. He worked construction for 42 years. 42 years of getting up at 5 in the morning, putting on those heavy work boots, driving to job sites before the sun came up. He came home dirty every day, hands rough as sandpaper from handling concrete and steel, back bent from carrying the weight of providing for us. His fingernails were always stained with grease and dirt that no amount of scrubbing could get out. He smelled like sawdust and sweat, and when he hugged me as a kid, his work shirt was always damp with the honest labor of building other people's dreams. He didn't understand my world of boardrooms and business suits, of conference calls and corporate strategies, and I was ashamed of his. When my colleagues talked about their fathers, the doctors, the lawyers, the executives who played golf on weekends and had business degrees from fancy universities, I'd change the subject fast. I'd talk about the weather, about sports, about anything except the man who worked with his hands to put me through college. I never brought him to company events, never introduced him to my friends, never invited him to see the office where I worked, the life he had made possible. I thought his simple way of talking, his work clothes, his calloused hands would embarrass me in front of people who mattered. People who mattered. Listen to that phrase. As if the man who sacrificed everything for me didn't matter. Pride is a dangerous thing. It'll make you throw away the most precious gifts while you're busy chasing worthless prizes. It'll convince you that where you came from is less important than where you're going. It'll make you forget that the people who loved you before you were successful are the only ones who'll love you if you lose it all. I remember the exact moment I realized how far I had drifted from him. I was at a company Christmas party, expensive suit, expensive watch, talking to the CEO about quarterly projections. My phone buzzed, text message from my dad. Saw your picture in the company newsletter your mom showed me. You look good, son. Proud of you. You know what I did? I glanced at it and put my phone away. Didn't respond. Was too busy networking, too busy being important, too busy being somebody I thought mattered more than being his son. The last real conversation we had was about money. He called me on a Tuesday evening and I could hear something different in his voice. Quiet, hesitant, like he was embarrassed to be calling. Son, he said, I hate to bother you, but I need to ask you something. Already I was annoyed. I had spreadsheets to review, a presentation for the board the next morning. What is it, Dad? The medical bills from your mom's surgery last month, he said. Insurance didn't cover everything, and I'm trying to figure out how to handle it. I should have asked how much. I should have asked how he was feeling, how mom was recovering, if there was anything else they needed. Instead, I sighed, actually sighed like his request was interrupting something more important. How much do you need? 12,000, he said quietly. I know it's a lot, and I wouldn't ask if, fine, I cut him off. I'll transfer it tomorrow. There was silence on the other end. Then he said, thank you, I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Don't worry about it, I said, but my tone made it clear this conversation was over. The next day I wrote the check. But I did it with an attitude that made him feel small, like he was bothering me, like his need for help was an inconvenience to my important life. When I handed it to him, I couldn't even look him in the eye. He looked at me that day, really looked at me, and said something that still echoes in my mind. Son, when did you become someone I don't recognize? The question hit me like a punch to the chest, but instead of examining myself, I got defensive. I was angry. Angry that he didn't appreciate how hard I worked. Angry that he couldn't see how successful I'd become. angry that he was making me feel guilty for achieving everything he never could. Maybe if you understood what it takes to succeed in this world, I told him, my voice sharp with resentment, you'd appreciate what I've built instead of making me feel bad about it. He just stared at me for a long moment. This man who had worked his hands bloody to give me opportunities he never had, who had gone without so I could have everything. He nodded slowly, folded that check, put it in his shirt pocket, and walked toward the door. I do appreciate it, he said without turning around. I just miss my son. And then he left. That was October 15th. I remember the date because I had a big presentation the next day that felt so much more important than my father's hurt feelings. The presentation went well. Got me another promotion, actually. More money, more responsibility, more reasons to be too busy for the people who mattered. 3 months later, my phone rang at 4:23 in the morning. You know how when your phone rings in the middle of the night, your heart stops? Because good news never comes at 4 a.m. My mother's voice shaking, barely able to get the words out. He had a heart attack. They're taking him to the hospital now. It's bad. You need to come. Have you ever driven to the hospital knowing you might never see someone alive again? Every red light feels like an eternity. Every slow car in front of you becomes an enemy. Your mind starts racing, making deals with God, promising to change, begging for just one more chance, just one more conversation, just one more opportunity to say the words you should have said years ago. I ran through those hospital doors at 6:47 a.m., still in my pajamas, hair a mess, and found my mother crying in the waiting room. She looked so small sitting there. This woman who had always seemed so strong. She was holding a cup of coffee with both hands, but her hands were shaking so much the coffee was spilling. Where is he? I asked, trying to catch my breath. She pointed down the hall toward the emergency room, but before I could move, the doctor came out. I'll never forget his face. I've seen that look before in movies, in TV shows, but when you see it in real life directed at you about someone you love, it hits different. Are you the family of... Yes, I interrupted. How is he? Can I see him? The doctor took a deep breath. I'm sorry, we did everything we could. He passed away about 20 minutes ago. His heart just couldn't handle the damage. The next few minutes are a blur of medical terms, explanations about massive heart attacks, questions about funeral arrangements, paperwork that needed to be signed. But I remember one moment crystal clear. I asked to see him, and they led me to this small, quiet room where he was lying on the bed, peaceful, like he was just taking a nap after one of his long construction days. The machines were quiet now, the room smelled like disinfectant and that particular hospital smell that you can never quite identify but never forget. I sat next to him and just stared for the longest time. This man who had seemed so strong, so invincible when I was growing up, looked smaller now, fragile. His hands, those hands that had built houses and fixed everything that broke in our home, were still and pale. And that's when I started talking. I told him about my job, about the promotion I just got, about the new house I was buying in the suburbs with the 3-car garage and the swimming pool, all the things I thought were so important, all the things I thought he should be proud of, all the things that seemed so meaningless now. But then the real emotions hit me like a freight train. The walls I had built around my heart crumbled and I started crying. Deep, ugly sobs that came from somewhere I didn't know existed. And the real words came out. The words I should have said years ago. I'm sorry, Dad. God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I was too busy to call you back. I'm sorry I was ashamed of you when you were the best man I ever knew. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't good enough when you were everything good about me. I told him about the guilt I carried, about how every Sunday when he called, I knew I should answer, but I convinced myself that work was more important. I told him about the nights I lay awake thinking I should visit, but I always found excuses. I'm sorry I never brought you to meet my colleagues because I was worried they'd judge you, when the truth is they should have been honored to meet the man who raised someone who could achieve what I achieved. I'm sorry I never told you that every good thing about me came from you. I sat there for over 2 hours, talking to him like we never talked when he was alive, telling him stories from my childhood, thanking him for all the sacrifices I never acknowledged, asking for forgiveness I'd never receive. But he couldn't hear me anymore. A week later, after the funeral, after all the relatives had gone home, after the flowers had withered and the casseroles had been eaten, my mother and I were going through his things, cleaning out his closet, boxing up his tools, deciding what to keep and what to give away. That's when my mother handed me an envelope with my name written on it in his careful handwriting. The envelope was thin, like it only contained a single sheet of paper. My heart started pounding as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated January 18th, 3 days after our last conversation. The conversation where I hurt him, the conversation where I made him feel small for asking for help, the conversation where he said he missed his son. The letter said, "Son, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, and I want you to know I understand. I know you think I don't understand your world, and maybe I don't, but I understand you, and that's what matters to me. I see how hard you work, how much you've achieved, and I'm proud of you every single day. I know I embarrass you sometimes with my simple ways, my work clothes, my lack of education, and I understand why you keep your distance. I'm not sophisticated like your friends. I don't know about business or investments or the things that matter in your world, but I want you to know something. Everything I did, every day I worked until my back ached, every overtime hour I picked up, every vacation I didn't take, every nice thing I didn't buy for myself was so you could have the chances I never had. I wanted you to go places I could never go, to be someone I could never be. You don't owe me anything. You don't owe me phone calls or visits or explanations. You've already given me everything I ever wanted. The chance to be your father. The chance to watch you become more successful than I ever dreamed possible. I know I'll never really fit into your life, and that's okay. I just want you to know that no matter how high you climb, no matter how far you go, no matter how important you become, you'll always be my little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest while we watched TV. I love you and I'm proud of you no matter what. Always have been, always will be. Dad. I broke down right there in his bedroom, surrounded by his clothes that still smelled like sawdust and Old Spice. My mother found me on the floor, holding that letter, crying harder than I had ever cried in my life. This man who I thought didn't understand me, understood me better than I understood myself. This man who I was ashamed of had spent his whole life being proud of me. This man who I thought was holding me back had been lifting me up every single day. You want to know what real success looks like? Real success is when the people who love you feel loved by you. Real success is when you make time for what matters before time runs out. Real success is when you remember that your achievements mean nothing if you achieve them by stepping on the hearts of the people who helped you get there. I kept that letter. I laminated it and put it in my wallet. I read it every day for a year, and slowly it changed everything about how I lived. I started calling my mother every single day, not because I had to, but because I wanted to hear her voice while I still could. I began showing up to my nephew's baseball games, even when I had important meetings. I took my wife on weekend trips without checking my email once. And you know what happened to my career? Nothing bad. The world didn't end because I set boundaries. My work didn't suffer because I remembered what I was working for. My income actually increased because I was happier, more focused, more present. But my relationships, they transformed completely. My wife told me she felt like she got her husband back. My mother says I became the son she always knew I could be. My siblings started inviting me to family gatherings again. The regret of words unsaid, of time not given, of love unexpressed, that regret will eat you alive if you let it. But it can also save you if you let it teach you. Time is the only currency that matters, and we're all spending it whether we realize it or not. The question is, are you spending it on what truly counts? My father's gone. I can't call him back. I can't tell him I love him one more time. I can't take him to see my office and introduce him to my colleagues with pride. I can't bring him to my son's graduation next month and watch his face light up with pride for his grandson. But you still have time. You still have chances. You still have people in your life who love you unconditionally and want to hear from you. Don't wait for the phone call at 4:23 in the morning. Don't wait for the hospital waiting room. Don't wait for the letter you'll read too late. Call them, visit them, tell them you love them. Not tomorrow when your schedule clears up, not next week when work slows down, not when things get easier, now, because the only thing worse than losing someone you love is losing them while they're still alive, one ignored phone call at a time.